The rain had barely stopped when the last few guests left the cemetery, black umbrellas closing like dark flowers wilting in the cold wind. 9-year-old Emily stood frozen at the graveside, her small fingers clutching the damp fabric of her dress. Her father's name was now carved in stone, a reminder that the only person who had loved her without condition was gone forever. She had no siblings, no mother, only a stepmother whose gaze lingered not with compassion, but with impatience. "Come on," the woman snapped, her voice sharp as the click of her heels against the wet pavement. "We don't have all day. The car is waiting." Emily hesitated, eyes wide and empty, as though her little body hadn't yet caught up with the cruel reality of loss. She bent down, pressing a single wilted daisy against the freshly turned soil. Her whisper was almost swallowed by the sound of wind brushing through the cemetery trees. "Goodbye, Daddy. I'll be good, I promise." By the time she straightened, her stepmother had already turned her back. The woman's sleek black coat trailed behind her like a shadow. Emily's small legs hurried after, but her heart felt heavier than her steps. She had no idea that in just a few hours her life would unravel even more violently than death itself. The mansion her father once filled with laughter felt like a cold museum. Every portrait, every book on the shelf seemed to scream of a happier past that Emily could no longer touch. She walked inside timidly, almost afraid to disturb the silence. The stepmother, Veronica, removed her hat, adjusted her lipstick in the mirror, and then turned sharply toward Emily. "This isn't going to work anymore," she said bluntly. Emily blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Veronica's eyes narrowed, her tone dripping with irritation. "Your father's gone. I have no obligation to keep you here. I didn't marry him to play mother. You're excess baggage." The little girl's lips trembled. "But this is my home. Daddy wanted me here." "Your father isn't here anymore, is he?" Veronica replied coldly. The conversation ended not with more words but with action. Within an hour, Emily's small suitcase was shoved into her hands. Her stepmother's driver dropped her at the edge of town, near a crumbling bus stop where the rain had started again. The world blurred through her tears as she sat on the bench, clutching her bag to her chest. She didn't know where to go. She didn't know who to trust. All she knew was that she was alone, utterly, terrifyingly alone. But fate has a way of listening when innocence cries. A sleek black car, almost out of place on the broken road, slowed to a stop near the bus shelter. The tinted window rolled down, and a man's voice called out. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Emily looked up to see a tall man stepping out. His suit was sharp, his presence commanding, but his eyes, kind and searching, softened everything about him. He was not the type of man one expected to see pulling over in the rain for a child, yet there he was. I don't have anywhere to go," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. The man crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. "My name's Alexander. What's yours?" "Emily," she murmured. Alexander glanced at the small suitcase, then at the trembling girl. He didn't ask for details yet. His instincts told him enough. She had just buried someone she loved, and now she sat abandoned. Something inside him twisted with recognition, with memory. Without hesitation, he removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "Well, Emily, you're not sitting here alone anymore." "Not on my watch." Alexander Price was no ordinary man. He was a millionaire, known across the city for building an empire from nothing. His name filled newspapers, his fortune whispered about in boardrooms. But what people didn't often talk about was his past. The nights he'd slept in foster homes, the years he'd wondered if anyone would ever call him family. As he led Emily into his car, something about her fragile silence echoed the boy he once was. The boy who had stood outside orphanage doors, clutching a backpack, praying someone would see him as more than a burden. "Do you have any relatives I can call?" he asked gently as the car glided through the city streets. Emily shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Just Daddy, he's gone." Alexander's throat tightened. He didn't push further. Instead, he offered her a soft smile. "Then for now, you're with me." News spread faster than Alexander anticipated, a millionaire businessman taking in a grieving little girl. People whispered, speculated, judged. Veronica, the stepmother, sneered when reporters asked her why she had abandoned the child. "She's not my responsibility," she scoffed. "That man is free to waste his money however he wants." But what no one could see were the quiet moments behind closed doors. Emily, timid at first, wandered Alexander's penthouse like a lost bird afraid to perch. She barely spoke. She often woke from nightmares, calling out for her father. Each time, Alexander was there, sometimes sitting in a chair by her bed, sometimes simply holding her hand until she fell back asleep. One evening, as they ate dinner, Emily finally looked up at him with wide, searching eyes. "Why are you being so nice to me?" The question pierced Alexander deeper than she could have known. He set down his fork slowly. "Because once upon a time, I was sitting where you are, and someone decided I wasn't worth keeping. I promised myself, if I ever had the chance, I would never let a child feel that way again." Emily blinked, surprised. For the first time since her father's funeral, she smiled. A small, fragile smile, but enough to warm the room. The weeks turned into months, and the bond between the two grew unshakable. Emily began to laugh again, her drawings filling Alexander's office walls, her voice echoing through the halls of his once empty home. She reminded him that wealth wasn't measured in numbers, but in lives touched and hearts healed. But then came the twist neither expected. One morning, Alexander's lawyer brought troubling news. Veronica had filed a claim, demanding custody of Emily, not out of love, but for money. If she could legally control Emily, she would also gain access to the trust fund Emily's father had left behind. Alexander clenched his jaw in fury. She abandoned that child in the rain. "I won't let her use Emily as a pawn." The custody battle was brutal. Veronica painted Alexander as opportunistic, accusing him of taking Emily for publicity. The courtroom buzzed with tension as lawyers argued back and forth. Emily, small and frightened, sat at Alexander's side, clutching his hand. When it was finally her turn to speak, the judge leaned forward kindly. "Emily, who do you want to live with?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the little girl. She stood up slowly, her voice trembling but clear. "I want to live with Mr. Alexander," she said, "because he makes me feel safe. He makes me feel like I still have a family." Her words cracked something open in the courtroom. Even the judge's eyes glistened. The ruling came swiftly. Custody was granted to Alexander. Veronica stormed out, furious that the money slipped from her grasp. But Emily didn't watch her leave. Instead, she wrapped her arms tightly around Alexander's waist, burying her face against him. For the first time, she knew she wasn't going to be left behind again. Alexander knelt down, his voice breaking as he whispered into her hair. "You'll never have to be alone again, Emily. Not ever." The crowd that had gathered outside the courthouse erupted with cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. But neither of them heard it. In that moment, it wasn't about wealth or headlines. It was about a promise kept. A broken little girl given the chance to be whole again, and a man who finally understood what all his fortune was truly for. From then on, Emily's life transformed. Alexander didn't just give her shelter, he gave her a world where she belonged. Together they visited libraries, parks, even the countryside where he taught her how to ride horses. Each small milestone healed the scars of abandonment bit by bit. And in return, Emily gave him something he had never known despite his millions, the unconditional love of a child who finally felt safe enough to love back. Alexander often said that saving Emily was the best business deal he ever made. But Emily, in her innocence, would shake her head and correct him. No, she'd say softly, slipping her hand into his. "You didn't save me. You found me." And with that, the house that had once been filled only with silence and success now rang with laughter, love, and the sound of two broken souls who had found their missing pieces in each other.